Pablo Escobar stood in the doorway of a poor school, holding an envelope containing enough money to transform the entire building. The teacher, Elena Morales, looked at the envelope, looked at Pablo, and then did something that terrified her students and amazed her community. She refused it. To his face. It was May 17th, 1983 at Escuela Santa Fe in one of Medellin's poorest neighborhoods. The school was barely functioning. 28 students crammed into a classroom with broken windows. The desks were salvaged and mismatched. There were no textbooks. Students shared 3 battered books between all of them. The roof leaked. The bathroom didn't work. The chalkboard was so worn that chalk barely showed. Elena Morales had been teaching there for 15 years. She was 52 years old and had dedicated her life to educating children the government had abandoned. She made 30,000 pesos a month, roughly $120, barely enough to cover rent and food. She spent her own money on chalk, paper when she could afford it, and small snacks for children who came to school hungry. Her students adored her. To them, she was proof that someone cared about their education, that someone believed they deserved better than poverty. Every morning, despite the broken building and lack of resources, Elena showed up and taught with passion. The school's condition had worsened over the past year. Winter rains damaged the roof further. 2 windows were broken by vandals and never replaced. Elena had written letters to the education department begging for repairs. The response was always the same: no budget, maybe next year. By May 1983, Elena knew next year would never come. The government didn't care about Escuela Santa Fe. She'd accepted this bitter reality and continued teaching anyway. That's when Pablo Escobar decided to visit. Elena was in the middle of a geography lesson when she heard the commotion outside. Students in other classrooms were running to windows, voices rising in excitement and fear. She walked to her broken window and looked out. 3 black SUVs had pulled up to the school. Men in casual clothes were getting out, looking around the neighborhood with the practiced awareness of bodyguards. And then Pablo Escobar himself stepped out of the center vehicle. Elena had never met Pablo, but like everyone in Medellin, she knew exactly who he was. By 1983, he was already a legend, feared by some, revered by others, impossible to ignore by anyone. He'd built hundreds of houses for the poor. He'd funded soccer fields and community centers. He was also responsible for violence, for corrupting the city, for flooding it with cocaine money. Elena watched as Pablo walked toward the school entrance, flanked by his men. Her heart was pounding, but not from excitement. She felt dread settling in her stomach. Whatever Pablo wanted, it couldn't be good for her school or her students. The school's principal, Señor Vargas, came rushing into Elena's classroom, his face flushed with nervous excitement. "Señora Morales," he said breathlessly, "Don Pablo is here. He's asking to see the school. He wants to speak with you specifically." "With me? Why me?" "I don't know, but you need to come. Now." Elena smoothed her simple dress, told her students to remain seated and quiet, and followed Señor Vargas to the principal's small office. When she entered, Pablo Escobar was standing by the window, looking out at the damaged schoolyard. He turned when she entered, and his eyes assessed her quickly. The kind of evaluation powerful men give to everyone they meet, deciding instantly whether someone matters or not. "Señora Morales," Pablo said, his voice polite but carrying natural authority, "I've heard about your dedication to these children." Elena didn't ask from whom. In a neighborhood this poor, everyone knew everyone, and Pablo had informants everywhere. "I do my job," Elena said simply. Pablo smiled slightly at her directness. "Your job is teaching in a building that should be condemned. Your students are learning in conditions that would shame any civilized country. And yet you stay. Why?" "Because these children deserve an education," Elena said. "And if I don't teach them, who will?" Pablo nodded, seeming to appreciate the answer. He gestured around the small office, at the water-stained ceiling, at the cracked walls. "The school's falling apart." "Yes." "The government won't help." "No, they won't. But I can." Pablo reached into his jacket and pulled out a white envelope. He placed it on the principal's desk. "There's $50,000 in that envelope. American dollars. It's enough to fix this building properly. New roof, new windows, new desks, new books, everything your students need." The room went silent. Senor Vargas was staring at the envelope like it was made of gold. Elena looked at it too, her mind calculating what $50,000 could do. It was more money than the school had seen in its entire 20-year existence. It was salvation in an envelope. All I ask, Pablo continued, is that you use it well. Improve this school. Give these children what they deserve. Elena looked from the envelope to Pablo's face. His expression was sincere. He seemed genuinely interested in helping. But Elena knew what that money represented. It was cocaine money. Money made from addiction and death. Money that had corrupted her city and destroyed families. Money that came with strings attached, even if Pablo wasn't stating them explicitly. She thought about her students, about little Carmen, who shared one pencil with 3 other children, about Miguel, who wore the same torn shoes every day, about Lucia, who was so smart but had no books to read. That envelope could change their lives, but it would also mean accepting that the only way her students could get what they deserved was through a criminal's charity. It would mean admitting that drug money was acceptable when it did good things. It would mean teaching her students that principles could be compromised when the need was great enough. Elena took a deep breath. "I can't accept it," she said quietly. The room froze. Senor Vargas made a small choking sound. Pablo's expression didn't change, but his eyes sharpened with interest. "I'm sorry," Pablo said. "I can't accept your money, Don Pablo." Elena's voice was steady now, though her hands were shaking. "I know you mean well. I know this could help my students tremendously. But I can't take money that comes from crime. I can't teach children about integrity and honesty while accepting donations from someone who—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "From someone whose wealth comes from illegal activity." The silence that followed was suffocating. Senor Vargas looked like he might faint. Pablo's bodyguards shifted slightly, tension visible in their postures. Pablo stared at Elena for a long moment. She met his gaze, terrified but refusing to look away. She'd just insulted one of the most powerful and dangerous men in Colombia in front of witnesses after he'd offered to help her school. She knew this could end very badly. Then Pablo did something no one expected. He smiled. Not a threatening smile, but one of genuine surprise and what looked like respect. "You're refusing $50,000 because you don't approve of where it came from," Pablo said slowly, as if testing the words. "Yes." "Even though your students desperately need it?" "Yes." "Even though the government has abandoned you and this is the only help you're likely to get?" "Yes." Pablo picked up the envelope and held it out toward her. "Take it anyway. Nobody needs to know where it came from. You can say it was an anonymous donation." Elena shook her head. "I would know. My students would eventually know. And what would that teach them? That principles are negotiable. That we can accept help from criminals as long as we benefit from it? You would rather let them suffer in a broken building than accept help from me. I would rather teach them to demand what they deserve from the people who are supposed to provide it, the government, the education system, than teach them to depend on criminals for charity." Pablo was quiet for another long moment. Then he carefully put the envelope back in his jacket pocket. "You're either the bravest woman in Medellin," he said, "or the most foolish." "Perhaps both," Elena said quietly. To everyone's shock, Pablo laughed. It was a genuine laugh, not cruel or mocking. "Senor Morales, I've had politicians accept my money while publicly denouncing me. I've had police take my bribes while raiding my operations. I've had priests bless my buildings while condemning my soul. But you refuse my help because you actually have principles you won't compromise." He stepped closer to her, and Elena forced herself not to step back. "I could have this school fixed anyway," Pablo said. "I could send my men tonight and renovate the entire building without asking your permission. You couldn't stop me." "No, I couldn't," Elena agreed. "But I would tell my students what happened. I would make sure they knew that their improved conditions came from drug money. I would use it as a lesson about why we need to change our society so that criminals aren't the only ones helping the poor." Pablo studied her face, and Elena saw something in his expression shift. A kind of recognition, like he was seeing something he hadn't expected to find. "You're going to make my life more difficult, aren't you?" Pablo said. You're going to be that voice that keeps reminding people that my money is dirty no matter how much good it does." "Yes," Elena said simply. "I am," Pablo nodded slowly. "Good. We need more people like you." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "I won't force my help on your school, Señora Morales. You've made your principles clear, and I respect that. But I'm going to do something else instead." "What?" "I'm going to make sure your story gets told. I'm going to make sure everyone in Medellin knows that there's a teacher who refused Pablo Escobar's money because she has standards. Maybe it will shame the government into actually helping you. Maybe it will inspire other people to have the courage to say no to me. Either way, you deserve to be heard." Elena didn't know how to respond to that. Pablo walked out of the office, got into his SUV, and left. The entire encounter had lasted less than 20 minutes, but it changed Elena's life forever. True to his word, Pablo made sure the story spread. Within a week, everyone in Medellin knew about the teacher who'd refused Pablo Escobar's donation. Journalists started calling. Elena's act of refusing compromise became national news, and the publicity worked. The city education department, embarrassed by the attention, suddenly found budget to repair Escuela Santa Fe. Within 2 months, the school had a new roof, new windows, proper desks and textbooks. The government claimed they'd always planned these improvements, but everyone knew the truth. They'd only acted because a teacher had shamed them by refusing drug money. Elena became something of a hero in Colombia's education circles. Other teachers cited her as inspiration. Students at universities studied her decision in ethics classes. She received awards for moral courage, though she never felt comfortable with the attention. She'd simply done what she believed was right. Pablo never contacted her again, but according to people who knew him, he kept track of Elena's career. He'd occasionally ask his people if the teacher was doing okay, if her school still had what it needed. When someone once suggested he should punish her for rejecting him, Pablo reportedly said, "Why would I punish someone for having more integrity than everyone else in this city?" Years later, after Pablo was dead and Colombia was trying to make sense of his complicated legacy, journalists sought out Elena Morales to ask about that day in 1983. She was retired by then, but still sharp and principled. "Did I do the right thing?" Elena said, reflecting on a reporter's question. "I don't know. My students suffered longer because I refused that money. The school stayed broken for 2 more months. Maybe I should have taken it and used it to help them immediately." "But," the reporter prompted, "but if I had taken it, I would have taught them that our values are conditional, that we can accept help from anyone if we're desperate enough, that the ends justify the means, and I couldn't do that. I couldn't look those children in the eyes and tell them to be honest and principled while I compromised my own standards." "Do you think Pablo Escobar respected your decision?" Elena considered this carefully. "I think he understood it, which surprised me. I think he saw so few people with actual principles that he recognized it when he encountered it. Did he respect it? Maybe. But more importantly, I respected myself for making that choice. And I think my students learned something valuable that day, even if they didn't fully understand it at the time." The story of Elena Morales and Pablo Escobar became one of the most famous moral dilemmas in Colombian history. It's taught in schools as an example of ethical decision-making under pressure. It's debated in philosophy classes. Was she right to refuse help her students desperately needed? Did her principles matter more than their immediate welfare? But for Elena, the answer was always simple. You don't teach children integrity by compromising your own. You don't build a better society by accepting that criminals are our only source of hope. And sometimes, the hardest thing to do, saying no when everyone expects you to say yes, is exactly what needs to be done. If this powerful story of moral courage and refusing compromise moved you, please subscribe and hit that like button. Share this with someone who needs to hear that standing by your principles, even when it costs you, is sometimes the most important choice you can make. Have you ever had to refuse something you needed because accepting it would compromise your values? Share your story in the comments, and don't forget to ring that notification bell for more incredible true stories about courage in impossible situations.